Dear students, once again, welcome to the Nature Matters video lecture series offered by the Department of English, Payyanur College, Payyanur. Today, we'll be discussing the first lesson of the second module of the textbook, the lesson titled Biodiversity. This is intended to give you an idea about the richness and the diversity of life on our planet Earth. This will tell you what biodiversity is and what should be our approach towards preserving this biodiversity, and what will happen if this biodiversity is not maintained, if we do not make very sincere attempts to maintain this biodiversity. This chapter is divided into three parts mainly. The first one is the introduction, which will give you a definition of biodiversity, then the three different types of biodiversity, and it also discusses the evolution and the genesis of biodiversity. The second part of this chapter is a discussion of the biogeographic classification of India, which are the different biogeographical realms, which there are 10 different such realms in India. It's a discussion of that. And the third and final section is on the value of biodiversity, why it is important to preserve biodiversity. Before we move on to the text or move on to the chapter, it's better to understand what is biodiversity. Actually, it's explained in the chapter, and different types of biodiversity are also discussed. But to begin with, please have an understanding that biodiversity stands for biological diversity. It's a clipped form of biological diversity. And biological diversity is the diversity of the living things, the plants and the animals, the organisms that we find around us, scattered in different parts of our planet Earth. And life is possible upon Earth because of this diversity. Because you will find that each and every organism depends upon other organisms, depends upon plants, depends upon the other natural resources for its life. So we have to understand that biodiversity is something that is of great importance as far as life on Earth is concerned, and it is something which we have to honor, respect and preserve. Now let us come to the chapter. It begins with a celebration of the great variety of life which has been supporting the human race for the last thousands of years. Actually, it is this diversity in nature, diversity upon Earth, that has made civilizations possible. Many civilizations have taken advantage of this biodiversity and have flourished. Nature has been giving us in plenty, what we call the bounty of nature, the generosity of nature, and the civilization that has made use of this bounty of nature in a positive way has survived. Other civilizations which either could not utilize these resources or which overexploited the resources, those civilizations have died out, they have perished. So it is very essential that we make a wise and sensible use of the diverse resources that are available on the Earth. Next, the lesson speaks about the classification procedure that is usually adopted by science. We classify knowledge, or we classify items for the purpose of easy understanding and in-depth analysis. Animals or plants or whatever be it, objects having similar features, similar characteristics are put in one class. And the process of classification actually helps us in making a more intense and focused study upon different sets of organisms or different sets of objects. And science has classified living things basically into plants and animals. That is why we have one branch of learning studying plants, botany, another branch learning animals, that's zoology. And there are further classifications, of course. And these classifications help us in understanding the distinctive features of that particular class which is under study, and how this class is different from other class of animals or plants. This classification has helped us in understanding the relative merit of plants and organisms belonging to different classes and making effective use of them. This has led to the development of societies, and this has led to the development of civilizations as mentioned earlier. See, for example, our knowledge of the different varieties of seeds and plants has helped us to improve agriculture. We do research upon the different species, and we do research to improve the quality of these species, thereby leading to increased agriculture production. One. In industry, see, we have tried to find out new resources, try to develop new resources also, so that they can be used as the raw materials for industrial production, and industrial production has gone up, leading to development again. In the health sector, we have studied the organisms from the perspective of health, and we have found out solutions, we have found out medicines for many health issues. See, in the present COVID situation, much research is taking place upon the nature of the coronavirus and how to develop a medicine to combat coronavirus, or how to find out a medicine to treat, a vaccine to treat coronavirus. So as already mentioned, this classification and the intense and in-depth study have helped us to understand the characteristics of different species in a better way, and to make use of these species and make use of the diverse species to human advantage. But there is the other side of the coin. Unfortunately, this kind of an understanding has led to a consumerist culture in human beings, and we are so materially oriented, or we are oriented towards materialistic comfort, that we are over exploiting nature, and we often resort to actions that are harmful to the preservation of biodiversity, rather than resorting to a sustainable development with a sensible use of resources. We often over-exploit resources, which ultimately leads to the exhaustion of those resources and to the extinction of many different species. Because if we keep on using something without any thought for future, that resource naturally will be exhausted. And this overuse in the case of plants and animals can lead to the extinction of a particular species. Next in the chapter is a definition of biodiversity. It's a technical definition actually, and non-science students may find it slightly difficult, but it's not a hard nut to crack in any way. You try to analyze it close by close, then you will be able to understand this. I'll read out from the text. Biological diversity or biodiversity is that part of nature which includes the differences in genes among the individuals of a species the variety and richness of all the plant and animal species at different scales in space, locally, in a region, in the country and the world, and various types of ecosystems, both terrestrial and aquatic, within a defined area. Since it's a definition, it's a pretty long sentence, but we will break it into parts and we will explain it. It's not that difficult to understand. Biological diversity or biodiversity is that part of nature, that aspect of nature, which includes, there are different components. One, the difference in genes among the individuals of a species. You take a particular species, say Homo sapiens, even within that species, you will find differences. That is, differences between one individual and another individual, for example. It's called genetic diversity. We will discuss that later. So this genetic diversity, or the differences or the diversity within the members of a species, that is one aspect of biodiversity. Second is the variety and richness of all plants and animal species at different scales in space. That is, we have different species, many different kinds of plants and animals located in different parts, or even in one single locality. Say in your own homestead, you will find, in your own garden, you will find many different plants, and in your own compound you will find many animals also. We do not observe them actually very meticulously. There are many ants, flies, like that, and of course we may have a cat, dog, cow, etc. So these differences in space, that can be the space can be a locality, can be a region, a larger area, it can be a country, a whole country, and it can be the whole world also. So what are the different species that we find in these areas, starting from a small area to the whole world? That is part of biodiversity. And the various types of ecosystem. The third category is the ecosystems. This is called ecosystem diversity. The second one is called species diversity. The first one I have already mentioned, it is genetic diversity. So ecosystem diversity, which are the various types of ecosystem, both terrestrial ecosystem, that is land-based ecosystem, and aquatic, that is water-based ecosystem, within a defined area, and what are the diverse species that we find in these different ecosystems. So all these things come under biological diversity. Next, we will find a discussion of the different types of biodiversity. I have mentioned the terms already when we discussed the definition of biodiversity. There are three different types of biodiversity, or biodiversity has three different components. The first one is genetic diversity, the second one is species diversity, and the third one is ecosystem diversity. Let's discuss genetic diversity. See, as already explained, every member of a species may not have the same or even similar characteristics. Take for example the human beings. You take for example the people in your own home. There are many genomic factors or factors of genes, genetic materials, that will make one individual different from another individual, and one member of a species different from another member of a species. See the visual, you will find different types of mango trees. That is one species, Mangifera indica, mango tree. But even in your compound, if you are from a village area, even in your compound you will find different types of mango trees, these different types which are displayed on the screen now, and all of them, as mentioned, belong to one particular species of plants. Same is the case with all other plants and animals, not only human beings and mango trees. We have to understand that this diversity, the genetic diversity within a species is very important, because if this genetic dissimilarity or genetic diversity is reduced, that will lead to inbreeding, and ultimately that may lead to the extinction of that species also. So genetic diversity is of that much importance. Another point discussed here is the concept of the gene pool. Gene pool is the pool, a reservoir, a collection of the genes or the genetic materials. And what is the significance of this gene pool? Much research is now taking place upon the genome projects, upon the genetic materials, and scientists are trying to identify certain basic distinctive genetic factors that cause a particular behavior, or that bring in a particular effect. That may be say your height, or that may be the heat tolerance of a plant, that may be the adaptability of a plant or an animal species to adjust to a particular climatic condition, can be anything. Scientists are now doing much work upon the genetic materials, and they are trying to identify certain genetic materials in a particular organism or in a particular plant, and to incorporate those materials into another organism or plants, so that a particular behavior of the original species, or the particular behavior of the original organism or plant can be brought into the other organism. So the genetic characteristics of many wild plants, for example, can be adopted to the domestic plants, and the domestic plants also can be developed as resistant to many of the climatic conditions to which they are not now resistant. And you will find that biotechnology research of the present day is manipulating the genes so that better quality medicines can be developed, better variety of seeds or plants can be developed, better raw materials can be developed to support industrial production and the like. So one simple change in the existing genetic structure can lead to very miraculous effect as far as a particular organism or a particular plant is concerned. The second component of biodiversity is species diversity, and we find a number of species upon this planet Earth. As per the current estimate, there are 8.7 million species of plants and animals upon the Earth. This is only the tip of the iceberg, and there are innumerable number of plants and animals, especially microorganisms, the lower level plants and animals, which having been identified by anybody, which having been studied upon by any researcher. So this 8.7 million, it is not the final word. More than that, this is a common statistics, and you will find the number varying according to different studies made by different scientists. I have taken this 8.7 million as a number which has greater consent. We will find different species scattered across different regions upon our planet Earth. And many species exist in the natural ecosystems, and we find some species existing in the ecosystems that human beings have developed, like an agriculture farm, for example, a natural ecosystem, say forest, or a sea, or a river, or a desert. And in natural ecosystem, we will find greater diversity than in the ecosystem that human beings have developed through their intervention as part of the civilization process. Take for example, a forest. In a forest, we will find innumerable number of species of plants as well as animals. Whereas in a farm, we find very limited number of species. Say if it is a coconut grove, you will find only coconut trees, only trees belonging to that species. If it's a paddy field, you will find the plant belonging only to that particular species. You go to plantations, you will find only one or two or maybe very few number of species there. And we have to understand one thing, that the human made or the artificial ecosystem can in no way compete with the natural ecosystem in terms of biodiversity. So the richness and value of a forest ecosystem, a natural ecosystem, is much higher than a plantation, which is a man-made ecosystem. Earlier, in the villages, we resorted to an agro-pastoral kind of life. We had different crops in the compound, and we have been maintaining a very harmonious relationship with these different species, and we have been catering to the conservation of this biodiversity. But modern intensive farming led to the concept of monocrop cultivation, where only one particular species is cultivated. This has a very harmful effect upon the biodiversity of that particular locality. Another concept introduced here in relation to species diversity is the concept of hotspots. Hotspot has become a very familiar term nowadays. In the corona terminology, hotspot is a word that we hear every day. So hotspot for us now is a very sensitive and a dangerous area where we do not want to go. Whereas from the biodiversity perspective, hotspot is a very positive notion. Hotspot is an area that is rich in species diversity. So it is an area which we try to preserve. And speaking about the species diversity in India, we can be proud that India is among the world's 15 nations that are exceptionally rich in species diversity. And we have a great responsibility to maintain this position, to see that we are not out of this list, to see that the species diversity is preserved in every possible way. The third component of biodiversity, as already mentioned, is the ecosystem diversity. We have different ecosystems. The broad classification, as you know, is terrestrial, that is land-based, and aquatic, the water-based ecosystem. But ecosystem is described in terms of the geographical region also, or the political entity, such as a country, a state, or a taluk also. And distinctive ecosystems include landscapes such as forests, grasslands, deserts, mountains, etc. In the terrestrial category, then sea, rivers, lakes, ponds, etc. in the aquatic category. An ecosystem is called natural when it is not disturbed by human beings. When the human beings intervene into the ecosystem and modify the ecosystem, it is called modified ecosystem. So a natural ecosystem always is richer in biodiversity than a modified ecosystem, because human intervention always will have some personal material interests. We make intervention in the ecosystem to get products for making our life better. But see, if natural ecosystems are also overused or overexploited, that will lead to the degradation of the ecosystem, and that will ultimately end up in the reduction in the biodiversity of the planet. The next point discussed in the chapter is the evolution and the genesis, the beginning, the start of biodiversity. We don't have any exact scientific evidence about the origin of the earth. Scientists, based on many indirect evidences, claim that the earth is around 4.5 billion years old. Life upon this earth was probably initiated as a product of organic reactions in the earth's primordial seas. Some organic changes in the sea which resulted in the development of some organisms, maybe unicellular microorganisms. There are also alternate explanations that life has begun from the muddy ooze, or life has been seeded from outer space. Many such explanations are there. But one thing is certain, that life actually originated in the form of unicellular organisms, microorganisms having one cell. And slowly and steadily, higher levels of organisms developed. And adaptation was a very important feature as far as the survival of the organism was concerned. Those organisms which were able to withstand the climatic conditions, the surroundings, those organisms could survive. Others perished. So many different species emerged, and failing to withstand the climatic conditions, failing to adapt to the surroundings, they perished. Abiotic changes in nature like climatic and atmospheric upheavals, repeated glaciations, that is formation of glaciers, continental drift, movement of the tectonic plates, etc., and formation of geographical barriers, segregated different communities of plants and animals, and gradually led to the formation of new species over millions of years. This is how organisms emerged and evolved into the present stature of bigger animals. So as mentioned, these small organisms emerged first, then multicellular organisms evolved. And these organisms were trying to adapt to the situations, adapt to the environment, adapt to their habitat, or adapt in their ecosystem, and they developed a relationship with other organisms in the same ecosystem. And these relationships were different. The relationship among different species was not uniform. There was the relationship with respect to food chains, then the prey-predator relationship, one animal eating another animal, then the parasitism, relationship of parasitism, where one plant or animal sucked its food or got its food, obtained its food without doing any work but taking advantage of the other animal or plant, and relationship of commensalism, that is a partnership beneficial to both the species, that is mutual benefit. So these were the different sorts of interrelationship that existed among different species. And as I already mentioned, many different species have gone extinct also. And when a species becomes extinct, there is a niche, there is a gap, there is a vacuum which is usually filled by the emergence of another species. So at the same time, many species are dying out, they are vanishing from the earth, and they are replaced by other species. But see, this process is not something that happens in one fine morning. It is a process which has taken millions of years to happen. So the process of evolution is a very slow and gradual process. And it is here man's role becomes very different. Because before the species of Homo sapiens, human beings, emerged, this extinction and the birth of new species were happening at a very natural pace. But when human species, Homo sapiens, appeared on Earth 0.2 million years ago, the entire process started getting upset. We have been destroying many species. We have been resorting to actions that are harmful to the biodiversity, and we have been doing it at a higher pace. That is what is more important. Nature itself had a mechanism of destruction and rebirth and so, but human intervention has speeded up, has accelerated this destruction of biodiversity or the degradation of the earth. The modern man, who is materialistic, who follows a consumerist culture, is destroying the earth, destroying the species, destroying the biodiversity at an alarmingly faster pace. The next section of the chapter is a discussion, or it's rather a listing of the biogeographic classification of India. Our country can be conveniently divided into 10 major regions based on the geography, climate and pattern of vegetation, seed, and the communities of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, insects, and other invertebrates that live in them. So these regions contain a variety of ecosystems like forests, grasslands, lakes, rivers, wetlands, mountains and hills, which have specific plant and animals. So there is a greater variety of life, greater variety of biotic life as far as these different regions are concerned. And now I'll read out the 10 different biogeographic zones of India. And you can find a visual representation, the images of these different zones also on the screen. The first one is the cold, mountainous, snow-covered trans-Himalayan region of Ladakh. That is the extreme north of India, the Himalayan mountains, where you will find the cover of snow throughout the year. The second zone is the Himalayan ranges and valleys of Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Assam, and other northeastern states. That's again Himalayan area, but it is not snow-clad, covered with snow all the time. The third one, the Terai, that is a low land where the Himalayan rivers flow into the plain. So it is more like a meeting of the Himalayan hills with the plains. The fourth zone is the Gangetic and the Brahmaputra plains, which are very fertile zones. The fifth one is the Thar desert of Rajasthan. It's an arid desert. Then the sixth one is the semi-arid grassland. Semi-arid means semi-dry. Arid means very dry. Grassland region of the Deccan Plateau, extending to states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. The next one, the seventh one, is the northeast states of India. Then the Western Ghats, which extends across Maharashtra, Karnataka and Kerala. The ninth one is the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And the 10th biogeographic zone is the long western and eastern coastal belts with the sandy beaches, forests and mangroves. The third section of the chapter discusses the value of biodiversity. The different species in the different ecosystem are performing great roles as far as our environment and the earth is concerned. Services like production of oxygen, reduction of carbon dioxide level, maintenance of water cycle, protection of the soil by mineral fixation, etc. are performed by the different plants and animals that inhabit the earth. We have to understand that the loss of biodiversity can lead to climatic changes of great magnitude, because every different species has a role to play as far as the ecosystem is concerned, as far as the maintenance of the balance of the earth is concerned. I need not tell you that we cannot even survive if the plants do not absorb the carbon dioxide and release oxygen for us to breathe. And see, the loss of forest cover coupled with the increasing release of carbon dioxide and other gases through industrialization has contributed to the greenhouse effect. You have studied this in your school days, so I am not explaining the concept. Global warming is causing the polar ice to melt, and the melting of the ice is going to have disastrous consequences, especially in island countries and countries like India. If the water level increases, naturally much land will be submerged. And as you are aware, there are reports that countries like Maldives will go underwater within a decade or two. Biodiversity is also essential for many ecological processes like fixing and recycling of nutrients, say for example nitrogen fixation, soil formation, circulation and cleansing of air and water, this purification of air and water, global life support, say like for example the plants absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, then maintaining the water balance within ecosystems, watershed protection, maintaining stream and river flows throughout the year, erosion control and local flood reduction. So many ecological factors or many ecological processes are influenced by, they are performed by, they are governed by biodiversity. We get resources for our food, energy, clothing, housing, medicine, etc. from our environment because of the diversity of the biosphere. Different societies depend upon their immediate environment for these resources. Say the tribal people, they depend upon the food that they get directly from the different trees. The people who live near to the aquatic ecosystems, they catch fish to be used as food. The farmers do cultivation in their fields. All these indicate how dependent we are upon the ecosystem of which we are a part. The agricultural societies make use of biodiversity to cultivate the crop that they need. Even people living in urban areas depend upon biodiversity for their food. They are not growing their food directly, but food reaches them from the villages either directly or in the form of a processed food. The chapter concludes with the message that preservation of biodiversity is of utmost importance as far as human life is concerned. If we want to survive, we have to see that this diversity is well protected, well preserved. We have to think of sustainable development in which we meet our developmental goals of the present without sacrificing the resources that we need for future development. So sustainable development will lead to the preservation of biodiversity and conservation of natural resources, which will be supportive not only for human beings but also for all the different plants and animals that inhabit this earth. So preservation of biodiversity or conservation of biodiversity will improve our standard of living, and that will ensure better standards of living in future for human beings as well as for other animals and plants. So let us take a vow that we will do everything possible to preserve this biodiversity. Maybe in a very small degree, at a very small level, but that too is important. Every action in that line is important. Thank you very much. Now let us discuss the short answer type comprehension questions. There are 10 questions and here we begin. The first question is, define biodiversity. Answer: biodiversity is defined as that part or aspect of nature which includes the differences in genes among the individuals of a species, the variety and richness of all the plant and animal species at different scales in space, locally, in a region, in the country and the world, and various types of ecosystems, both terrestrial and aquatic. The second question is, what are the 3 levels of biological diversity? Answer: the 3 levels of biological diversity are genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. The third question is, define genetic diversity. Answer: Genetic diversity can be defined as the diversity or variability of individual organisms within a species. This diversity is affected by the difference in genes. Question number 4 is, what is species diversity? Give examples. Species diversity is the number of plants and animals that are present in a region. Plants and animals belonging to different species present in any particular area are examples of this. The next question is, what is gene pool? Answer: it's a sum of all genes or genetic information of any population of organisms at a given time. The next question is, define greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect is the process by which radiation from a planet's atmosphere warms the planet's surface to a temperature above what it would be without this atmosphere. It's a phenomenon in which the atmosphere of a planet traps radiation emitted by its sun. It is caused by gases such as carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane that allow the incoming sunlight to pass through but retain the heat radiated back from the planet's surface. Question number 7. What is ecosystem diversity? Ecosystem diversity refers to the number of ecosystems in a particular geographical location. Distinctive ecosystems include forests, grasslands, deserts, lakes, etc. Question number 8. What do plants offer us? Answer: plants give us edible fruits, roots and shoots, fodder for cattle, fuel for cooking, medicines, gum, resin, etc. The 9th question. How many biogeographical regions are there in India? Answer: there are 10 biogeographical regions in India. They range from the snow-clad Trans-Himalayan region of Ladakh to the long western and eastern coastal belt. And now the last question. What are some of the important services offered by ecosystems? The answer is production of food and water, fixing and recycling of nutrients, circulation and cleansing of air and water, etc. are some of the important services offered by ecosystems. Ecosystem services are broadly classified into 4: provisioning, regulating, habitat, and cultural. Thank you very much for listening to this video lecture.